All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is an Arlen Monday. This is our last Monday together, right, Arlen? You'll be moving to Tuesday. Is that correct, next week?
Yes, I'll be starting Tuesday. It just fits my schedule better, and I hope it works for us too.
Well, we certainly want to make sure that your schedule is accommodated because you add a lot to the program and provide a different perspective, a different viewpoint. Before we get into the more specific topics, I do want to get into that. Just a little bit of the general disagreements or way we shade issues slightly differently. And I had the bad and the good Trump. But I thought what was really interesting, we were talking about this, is you're much more of a Trump detractor than I am. I mean, I'll criticize him. No question. I'm not happy with him. I didn't vote for Trump. I don't want Trump to be our president. But you really, really, really don't like the guy. But yet, are you thawing a little bit with at least the anti-war slant that we seem to be seeing in his administration?
Well, yeah, you're right. That was one thing he said when he talked about reducing the nuclear stockpiles. I mean, that was good, and you don't hear it from anybody else. So if he really means it, that's great. But he's doing so many negative things also at the same time. It's just hard to keep up with.
Yeah, it's really strange, right? I mean, he is a very different kind of president than we've seen. And I think, to be fair to the electorate, I think that's a big part of the appeal. I think for American public, we have seen for the past 40, 50, from the lifetime of most Americans today, things have not been that great. And we've seen, there's been peaceful periods, certainly the Bill Clinton years, but on balance, the quality of life, the purchasing power of the American consumer the average consumer hasn't gone up much. The hours worked has continued to rise. There's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And Trump, whatever you may think of him, whatever you may think of what he's doing, he's shaking things up. And I think that is what a lot of Americans want.
I think you're right. People are very disappointed in all the politicians coming before him who, said, hey, everything's doing great when we know it isn't, because so many people are struggling. So many people don't have enough to eat, or so many people don't have housing. I mean, there are some real problems in this country, and you just can't be ignored. And he's offering something different. I think it's the worst kind of different, but I think that's part of his appeal.
Well, you don't think it's all terribly bad difference, but a lot of it you don't like, obviously. But as you were just saying, not all of it is that bad. Before we get to this first clip, and I started with not necessarily because this is the best clip from my perspective in terms of how Trump looks, but more because I think it's most momentous. It really, if it happens, would mean a major shift in the way we conduct foreign policy and the way we do business as the world's hegemon. But I do want you to join us on Halitics on Facebook. We got a lot of ferment there. Lost a relatively frequent poster, Arlen. He said, "I'm not the same Hal that he knew in Monterey," and he was pretty upset about that. And I was disappointed too. But I don't think I've changed. I just think it's the parties that have changed, or my perspective of them. Certainly the Democrats has changed somewhat since the Monterey days.
Yeah, I mean, your viewpoint's a little different than the average person. I think you're not 100% progressive, and you're not a right winger, and you kind of pick and choose certain issues that you feel strongly about. So, and that's okay. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, pretty much stayed the same when it comes to universal health coverage, when it comes to tariffs. I was always for tariffs. It's not like that's a new thing for me, for taxing the bads, not the goods. Let's go right, instead of talking about Hal so much, I do want you to click like, do want you to click subscribe, join us on Halitics. Let's play this first clip. It's relatively long, but I really didn't want to pick and choose or cut up Trump and just give him the whole 2 minutes or so to speak. Here we go.
Other countries want to have a strong United States. They want to have a strong America. And I think it's going to make us very, very strong, much stronger. And we have a lot of work we're doing on the military. Our military already, I've authorized some contracts to be built that are very substantial. We're building the greatest equipment in the world. We have the greatest military equipment in the world. We're building it. At some point, when things settle down, I'm going to meet with China, and I'm going to meet with Russia in particular, those two, and I'm going to say there's no reason for us to be spending almost $1 trillion on military. There's no reason for you to be spending $400 billion. China's going to be at 400 billion. We're at $1 trillion. We're going to be at close to $1 trillion. And I'm going to say we can settle this on, we can spend this on other things. We don't have to spend this on military and I'm going to be meeting with China. You know, we were trying to de-escalate nuclear, and I was in a position where Russia had agreed and China had agreed we were going to start, and then we had a rigged election, so that never took place. But this one was too big to rig. We won by so much that it was too big to rig.
You want to do the China meeting in the United States, or would you travel to China for that?
For what?
A China meeting. Would you do that here or
I
there?
tell people all the time, you know, the question is who's going to have the first meeting, where are you going to, I say this to Putin, to President Xi, I say to everybody, never bothered me, you know, I'm willing to say I'll go first. It doesn't matter. It's the end result that counts. So it doesn't make any difference.
All right. So you see a lot of what we were talking about, the, you know, really strange, you know, I don't know what the word dichotomy there in Trump. Like some of his remarks, there seemed to be no ego. I don't care who goes first. I just want to get to peace. You know, I'll go visit you. That's fine, which is exactly what I want to hear. And then you get this bombast about how my election was too big to rig. And it's really like there's definitely almost a split personality there. But I don't know if you want to comment on that, Arlen, or just more generally your reaction to that clip.
Well, I'll tell you something I think is interesting. I was talking with our friend Carl in Santa Cruz about Trump, and Trump seems to be a little bit more animated, talking a little bit more clearly than he did. He sounded crazy during the campaign more and more, and he's doing crazy things now, of course. But he seems, I think he loves the position he's in. He's people are fawning all over him, and he's winning everything, and he's got to feel good about the way things are going and how people are, respecting him and idolizing him and all that kind of thing. So, but the things he says, you got to take with a grain of salt anyway. He'll change on a dime. I mean, he's just not consistent at all.
But you, bottom line, do like the specific call to cut our military budget and to bring China and Russia into it.
Yeah, that's one thing. I'm surprised I could find something that I agree with him with, but that's one of them, and it's a good thing. But again, like I say, he'll say it, and then at the same time he's saying, well, we're going to have all these new weapons and all this and that. So who knows what's actually going to happen when all is said and done.
Yeah, but to be fair to Trump, he did say during the campaign, he's been saying for well over a year that he wanted peace in Ukraine. He wanted that war to end. He said specifically, I want people not to get killed. That was his exact quote on CNN. Well over, I think it was in 23. He said, I want people not to die. And he's living up to that. I mean, he calls for the cut in budget. He's negotiating with Putin. He's been calling Putin on the phone, which we never saw during the Blinken years. And his defense secretary, Hegseth, went to NATO and said, this bloodshed has to end. So I think he seems, at least in this particular area, to be pretty serious about wanting peace.
I got to agree with you on this one, Hal. Surprisingly, he's not a warmonger. That's the best thing about him. He's never been one to go say, "Oh, I'm going to bomb everybody and do this and that." He doesn't seem to have any great like for wars and people dying and all that. So there's one good thing about him, and that's okay.
But that's a pretty darn big thing, right? I mean, I'm not gonna. There's lots of things I dislike about Trump that I think are really important, but this is a really, really big thing. This isn't like a little something on the edges that we can say, well, he really wants to make sure we take care of all the stray dogs and cats out there. Not that they're not important. I mean, I love stray dogs and cats, but endless war. I mean, what did he say? It's $1 trillion budget. It's $1 trillion item in our budget annually. And when you look at the carnage, the destruction, the loss in life and treasure, the damage to the environment, the way that our wars have made us hated and targets around the world, this is incredibly important, in my opinion.
I agree. It is very important, and I hope that there's going to be follow through. We'll have to just wait and see. I mean, he's, if he's willing to, cut down. Well, look at it this way, Hal. Right now, he and Elon Musk are cutting everything they can in government. If they could actually go into the Pentagon and start cutting things, that would be a surprise, and I would like that.
So before we get to the next item, I just want to sort of put your feet to the fire a little bit. You're one of those, and we see these folks like you, well, we see you and others on Halitics on Facebook, which I guess I'll take my opportunity. Yes, again, please do join us on Halitics on Facebook, who make the point and still make the point how awful Trump was. I'm not saying you do this. You haven't done this lately. You are very critical of Trump, but you don't bash those of us who chose to vote for Jill Stein. But I make the argument that the point that to justify voting for Kamala Harris, you had to be able to say convincingly that she was clearly better or clearly less bad than Trump. And if you can't say that, if you can't say that there's a qualitative difference between the two of them, then I think you have a moral duty to vote for neither, because they're both very, very problematic, or worse. So when you hear Trump say something that you would have never, ever heard from Kamala Harris or from Biden, when you see him actually going out there trying to negotiate peace, when you see that in his presidency to date, bombs haven't been falling on Gaza, do you say, well, gee, maybe that vote for Jill Stein wasn't so wrong-headed after all?
Well, I would much rather have Jill Stein or Kamala Harris than Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is the worst president we've ever had, and it's probably only going to get worse. But and I wish Kamala was president. Really, I think she wouldn't do anything horrific that we but at least it wouldn't be the chaos we have now, where we're cutting everybody in the government and doing all kinds of destroying the rules in the Constitution and everything that we have going on now. That wouldn't have happened. So, but Kamala Harris ran a bad campaign. She wasn't a great candidate, and Trump took advantage and he won.
All right, let's move on. Let's move down to the coast of Cuba and the prison there, Guantanamo Bay. Here's Trump policy that I think is just incredibly wrong-headed, misguided, cruel. Here we go.
CBS News has learned the Trump administration is sending nonviolent, low-risk migrant detainees to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Remember, just last month, President Trump said the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo would house what he called the worst migrants and, quote, provide additional detention space for high-priority criminal aliens. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez broke this news for us and joins us now from Washington. Camilo, what are you learning about this?
Before we start, hear a little more. I want to hear a little more. I just want to do this, Arl. I'm very critical of the media. I give CBS News a lot of credit. Apparently, they did break the story. They've been following it, and they were able to conclude that no, despite the insistence by Trump that he would only put like murderers and rapists and armed robbers and the worst of the worst, these are just, ordinary people going about their day-to-day lives, trying just to survive, trying just to take care of their families. And now they're being loaded into these black planes and flown to this remote location where they're completely without protection.
I really don't understand what he's doing with this new policy in Guantanamo. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure there must be a reason behind it, but I don't know what it is.
Well, you're absolutely right. It doesn't seem to make any sense. It's extremely expensive as well, right? I mean, it costs just tons of money to, first of all, transport people there, and then to have to feed them, shelter them, clothe them, and have a staff there to take care of them. It's irrational.
There's got to be somebody who's pushed him to do that, or he just came up with it on his own. But I haven't figured out what he's doing and why he's doing it.
It's terrible. Let me play a little more.
Situation, and how did you learn about this? Take us behind your reporting.
Hi, Lindsay. When President Trump instructed the U.S. government to essentially convert the naval base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, into a large-scale and massive immigration detention center, he said that that facility would be used to detain high-priority criminals and the worst migrants who are in U.S. federal immigration custody. And since then, U.S. officials, including Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, have touted flights that have included migrants who they say are suspected gang members, including members of the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan prison gang, as well as migrants with serious criminal records that include rapists and murderers. But internal government documents that we obtained here at CBS News, Lindsay, show that in addition to that population, the Trump administration has also been sending migrants who are considered to be nonviolent and also low risk. What does that mean? Well, these are migrants who are in the country illegally, who lack legal status, Lindsay, but otherwise do not have any serious criminal record and are there pending deportation.
Yeah, so basically just repeating what we were just saying, Arlen, and I want to just get your reaction to one of the comments at Halitics on Facebook, which again, you should join if you haven't yet. The comment is blame Biden for his open borders policy, which allegedly resulted in a situation that Trump has no choice but to react in this manner. Do you have a pithy or even a long response to that comment?
Well, I think it may have been the biggest issue that helped Trump the most was just having so many, immigrants coming across our borders, and it did seem to be like an open border. I mean, it really wasn't, but there were a lot of people getting in, and I think Americans don't really like to see that. Just like the rest of the world, there's a lot of reaction to immigrants coming into other countries, and their population are getting kind of upset and turning a little bit toward the right and toward an authoritarian view like Trump's.
Yeah, well, I hate cruelty. I hate this kind of just insensitivity to the needs of human beings and separating families and all that. I'm sure many of these folks are going to die. There's not going to be any real oversight to ensure that they're treated fairly. I don't really think there's anything to justify this whatsoever. I do understand maybe some folks need to be repatriated, and Trump is working on that. There's an interesting piece by Ruben Navarrete that you recommended. We'll talk about that in just a moment. I think that what's lost in all of this, and yes, I don't think Biden and Harris knew what to do. I mean, Obama was the great deporter. When it's not like Democrats haven't done plenty to get rid of people or keep them from coming into this country in the past. I think what Obama's policy was very cruel and misguided, wrongheaded, and ignores the fact that it's U.S. policy that so often drives people to come here, that our foreign policy makes life almost unlivable in some places. And so folks in those countries come to the United States. I don't have all the answers, which is rare for me to ever admit, but one answer is not flying people to some remote island where we shouldn't even have a base and keeping them there.
Yeah, it's really bad in a lot of countries around this globe, and people have, it's natural for people to want to come somewhere where they don't have all the violence and the poverty and all that, and they want to come to the United States, and if they're able to do it, they will. But, and you're right, part of it is our foreign policy has made things a lot worse, and we're not helping the other countries as much as we should, so that, that makes a difference. Another thing I want to say is that when Trump, his first term, I think they let a lot of immigrants in also, didn't they? As far as I know, I think that was the case.
Trump was a deporter. He deported a lot of folks. I don't think he deported as many as Obama did in Obama's, either of Obama's two terms, right? So Obama was president for twice as long. I think he deported well over twice as many people as Trump. But Trump did tighten up the border quite a bit. Let's get to this piece. Now, you recommended this piece, Arlen. So here's and I got most of it. Maybe I missed a few paragraphs to show folks. But before we get to what I took out of it, why did you think this was a worthwhile article by actually a relatively conservative I'm not sure if he's exactly Republican, but Ruben Navarrette's certainly not a progressive or liberal Democrat. And I see you hunting around. Arlen is desperately, where are my notes? Where are my notes?
I don't know.
Do it off the cuff. What do you remember now? Is there something in particular that jumped out at you about this article?
Well, he just doesn't take the normal line that, people do take. And he says there's other reasons that, the immigration is happening. And the other countries are not, are partly responsible, that they're driving people out. And, and so, there's no, that's not helping, obviously. And the fact is, a lot of the immigrants that come in here make life easier for Americans too, because they, work for families and make families, give them somebody that works for them and helps them and makes their life easier. So, there's also a lot of businesses that need a lot of these people too. So, it's not all black and white, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think, Navarrete understands that.
Well, here's part of the piece. I think you were alluding to this, Arlen, where Navarrete refers to some of the conversations he's had with immigrants who say flat out the reason they left their country is because they really had no economic choice. They simply could not support their families, and they blame the corrupt, and this is his language, not mine. This is Navarrette's, not mine or yours. They blame the corrupt and inept politicians back home who let them down. He also does get into the other issue you discussed there, which is how many Americans benefit. And in Navarrette's art, and this is where I actually take issue with everything he said. Not completely. I think there's a lot of truth, but I think the problem with corrupt and inept politicians in Latin America is significantly due to American policy, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton famously supported a right-wing coup in Honduras that led to the ouster of a socialist, and a military dictator took his place. We've seen that all over Latin America, even in places like Venezuela, where you had a Chavista, the Chavez regime. Many criticized them for ineptness and for corruption. That was a reaction to right-wing corporate American rule. So we deserve a tremendous amount of the blame. But again, more from Navarrete, the availability of household labor. By the way, I agree with this. I know families who are able to take great advantage. It's not like they're paying below minimum wage, but minimum wage in America is pretty low, even in cities like New York, where you have, I believe, a $15, maybe it's even higher now, minimum wage. Still, for New York City, that's very low money. So families are able, as Navarrete says, to take advantage of low wage household labor. But that's only some families, right? Plenty can't. And others might say, hey, you know what? I wouldn't mind getting a job as a maid, as a mother's helper, but I'm not going to compete I'm not going to do it for $15 an hour. I need 25. And those jobs aren't available because of the availability of lower paid immigrant labor. So it does really tamp down wages. I mean, there's a legitimate, that's a legitimate concern for American workers.
But that's going to be really tough on a lot of companies and a lot of families if you get more and more people who are, leaving, and to go back or whatever, or just being kicked out of the country. There's going to be a lot of people upset with that, and that'll be kind of interesting. But I think I did find the Navarrete article, and I think one of the most interesting things is why it's so important for Republicans. And he makes the point that Republicans resist the efforts to convey citizenship onto the undocumented because of the voting privileges that go with it. They're afraid that the Hispanic Americans are going to vote against Republicans and for Democrats. So that's one of the issues that's, I think, pushing this, anti-immigrant program.
Yeah, there we go. I put that up on screen too, Arlen. the highlighted section relates to what you were just saying. Just want to also just give shout outs to Ari and Shade in the chat. If you want to join us, 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you. Shade's point we'll go to first. He's skeptical of Trump's plan to cut the military budget, saying if the budget were halved, China and Russia could coordinate their actions to overwhelm U.S. interests. Unlike China and Russia, the U.S. is likely to have to fight a two-front war. I'm not sure if I buy that. China has India on its southern and southwest border, and India is an even bigger country than China in terms of population. Certainly not as advanced, but it's advanced. It's a nuclear power. So I think China definitely has to worry about India as well. And Russia, for all the perhaps negotiating between China and Russia and coordinating, they're very mutually suspicious as well. So, and Russia also would face a two-front war even without China, because they have Japan to their east and they have Europe to their west. And they have the United States. If you just go north across the Arctic, you get to Canada and the United States. So I'm not in agreement with that. I think also, to give Trump his due, he's saying, hey, it's not just the United States that would unilaterally cut its budget. He's also would negotiate with China and Russia to do the same. So I think he deserves a little more credit than just, he would unilaterally disarm it, which is a suggestion there. And then from Shade, Hal is not a progressive, so perhaps still a true progressive. Yes, I am definitely not a progressive, whatever else I may be. Here you go. Most Republicans realize they've been cruel toward immigrants. And the last thing they want to do is give the people they've abused the power to get even at the ballot box. Navarrete, though, he actually pulls the rug out from his own argument, saying that most of the immigrants don't really care about voting particularly anyway. They view politics as a loser's game. They don't really buy into democracy. And I think Navarrete, I've seen him extol Republicans. Also, I'm not sure I even agree with that, because George W. Bush, for example, did pretty well with Latinos. He had about a 40% vote, and Trump won Latino men. So I understand there's a difference between Latino men who vote and those who are immigrants, but I'm not persuaded that the immigrant population would necessarily be overwhelmingly Democratic. Arlen, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, the Latinos are generally a kind of a conservative type people. A lot of them are Catholics. So, they can't be counted upon to be progressives necessarily. But one more thing I want to mention, too, is when Trump is talking about cutting our budget and all that, you just can't ignore the military-industrial complex. They've been here forever. They're going to push very hard to get their weapons, sent overseas. And, they're not going to fold. So I think Trump would have a tough time doing what he wants to do, what he says he wants to do.
Well, Navarrete makes the point, which I don't have the quote from the article. I only took so much from it because we have a lot to get to, Arlen. But he makes the point that Trump has been successful in getting leaders he specifically identifies Mexico and Colombia to take back and to accept repatriated citizens of their countries. And he addresses that. He says that MAGA is reacting positively. Hey, look, he's getting rid of them and they're going back. And Navarrete says that those leaders, meaning Sheinbaum in Mexico, she's the president. I don't know who the Colombian president is. I should know, but I don't. That they have no choice. If they said they're after all, they're Colombian, they're Mexican. I agree. You can't say no to your own people. He's right. But then he ends, it will look like they failed their people twice. I don't think that's fair. How can you blame Claudia Sheinbaum for failing the Mexican people? She's been president for 2 or 3 months, 4 months, 5 months? I don't think that's a fair point.
The government in general has treated their people poorly in a lot of countries, and that's why a lot of people come here instead of staying where they are.
Yeah, I just don't think it's the leadership. I mean, there is poor leadership, but they tend to be leaders that the American military and the American military-industrial complex backed and pushed to, become president or whatever title they have. over often the will of their people. So
Yes.
it's a complicated situation, as Navarrete correctly points out. What do you think should be done? Do you have any solutions to this, Arlen? Because you do, I think, recognize we are more so even than I do. I don't really think we have much of an immigrant problem. I think we have a wealth and income distribution problem. But what would you propose?
Well, I just think we have to be really tighten up things at the border, make sure, who's getting in and what their reasons are. And, it just shouldn't be easy. It should be really a difficult thing to do so we aren't inundated with too many people. I think we do need some, obviously. It helps our economy in a lot of ways, especially as our population ages, and we're going to need people, helping out with Social Security and things like that, for us old folks. So there's a lot of positives in having immigrants here, but maybe too many is too much.
So you're just thinking of yourself, Orlin. You're just thinking of your retirement. You want those hardworking Latinos to be paying into the Social Security system so you'll be able to, enjoy your retirement.
That's another point, though. They are hard workers, most of them. I mean, they really want to succeed. They want to help their families. And they're probably a lot harder workers than the Native Americans or the average Americans, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not gonna buy that one, but okay. Don't forget, subscribe. Let me see. There it is. Subscribe now. Click like if you haven't yet done so. And do check in if you can. 240-242-5646. There are definitely complexities to immigration. And I would say beyond that, that what Trump, I think we agree that whatever complexities there are, one solution is not to round folks up, put them in these black airplanes and fly them down to Gitmo. That's the wrong solution. Let's get to this. I don't really have a lot of comment on this. I mean, it's just Trump is, like we said, he's a strange guy.
White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night.
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the president questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
All right, before we get to Caitlin Collins' follow-up question, which I thought was good. I mean, she showed a lot of guts here. Good for her. Makes me understand a little better why CNN would have hired her. But what do you think about what Caroline Levitt just said there, Arlen, which is, hey, we don't have to answer your damn questions. We don't have to talk to you if we don't want to, and we'll choose who we let in the room in the first place.
It's all about retribution, Hal. We all know that. I mean, they're just getting back at the press.
But isn't she right? She's got a point. You can't argue with that. I mean, I kind of agree with her in this sense, and I think the media is way too worried about access. You can just tell your darn story. You don't need to ask her questions that she can't answer and, put her on the spot. I mean, look, Trump does what he does. Report it. If they want some they want flatterers in their White House press room, fine. Go ahead, have your flatterers.
But they're just making it tougher for reporters. You have big organizations. You have the Washington Post, New York Times, NBC, all that, and they've always had the right to go in and get their stories. But if they're not allowed on the plane or they're pushed aside and not given the access that Fox News does, I mean that's just plain retribution, and it's mean, and I don't see anything good about that.
Well, I agree with that in terms of the look, right? And I agree with the perception. It's not great and it looks petty. It is petty, but in the end, I mean, whatever, do what, keep up. I mean, I think she ultimately is stating the truth. We don't have a system like in the UK where the British Prime Minister is required to answer questions. It's a different setup here. I remember when Ronald Reagan would stand on Air Force One and the engines would be screaming and Sam Donaldson would be trying to get a question out and Reagan would be pretending he couldn't hear him. It was pretty funny, but in the end, I don't judge presidents based on how their flacks answer questions. I base it on their policies.
Mentioned something about the AP. My understanding was that they're coming down on them because they keep saying Gulf of Mexico instead.
Yeah. Well, let me play the rest of the clip because that's where how Caitlin Collins follows up.
Retaliatory in nature is the argument, because the reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the Geographical Identification Name Server. And Apple has recognized that. Google has recognized that. Pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America. And it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world.
I mean, it's comic, really. It's comedy.
It is. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I understand that the AP is actually owned by people outside of this country. So it would be, obvious that they would go with the rest of the world and say Gulf of Mexico, as it always has been. But, she is saying, oh, well, since we changed it to Gulf of America, everybody has to do that. And it's really sad that, Google and all these top-notch big companies are giving in to Trump. I think that's very sad.
I think that is I think that's far more interesting to me than that Trump is so petty that he's like, well, if they call it Gulf of Mexico, they don't get to ask me questions. I mean, whatever. But it is awful, right? Google, Apple, or just like, fine, we'll call it whatever you want. It's not up to the U.S. president. I don't think is there some official body that determines the geographical names for these entities? I don't, in Germany, it's Deutschland. In England, it's Germany. Which is it? Is it Deutschland or is it Germany? I don't know. It's crazy.
Well,
I wonder, before you follow up, if you're in Mexico City, if you're in Ciudad Mexico, and you fire up your laptop and you go to Google Maps, is it going to say Golfo de Mexico or is it going to say Gulf of America? I don't.
Well, let me ask you this, Hal. If Trump decided, Mexico should be named Southern United States instead of Mexico, and would everybody go along with him? And just because he said that, I mean, it's absurd.
Agreed. I just don't know whether Google and Apple have, whether they call it different things, because they can change what you see when you go to a particular website based on what your IP address is. So if you have and I think all the Mexican IP addresses have a different, first three letter, first number or something, or I don't know how frankly, I don't know how they do it, but they do know. So would a Google map of Mexico show a different name than a Google map of the United States for the same body of water? I don't know.
Well, I think we all saw what happened at the Trump inauguration, where all these billionaire people from Google and Apple and Elon Musk and all those people were right in the front row. I mean, they were in essence saying, hey, you won and we're with you and we're not going to push against you and we'll do what we can to help. And that's awful.
Yeah, well, I think it's also what we could expect. So I'm actually now. Oh, see, I was in the wrong place. I was trying to find the city of Veracruz because I know that's on the Gulf of what I call the Gulf of Mexico, but instead I went to Veracruz, Brazil. So let's see what it shows here when we get to.
Yeah,
Yes, look at this. This is quite interesting, and I think disappointing, Arlen, as you say. It is Gulf of America on my Google Maps. Let me see if I can show that to folks. Let me see if they can see that. So can you see that Gulf of America there? Let me blow that up a little bit. I have not even looked for this, but now I can see it.
That's
quite extraordinary.
When the Trump administration can decide what, bodies of water can be named, maybe they'll start renaming countries. I mean, it's absurd.
Is Rand McNally now going to change from Gulf of America to, and again, this is the US. I wonder if, is there Google.ca or Google.mx, I think would be Mexico. So I'm going to look and see if I can. So there it is. And you see how that still shows Gulf of America, even though this is now google.com.mx, which I believe is the Mexican version, right?
Yeah, it's Google. Google has a say over probably all the Googles in the world. So I would imagine.
I just thought maybe because it's the Mexican website version, whatever. No, it's crazy. I mean, look, this is the thing. It's like I can say I'm really glad Trump is talking about cutting the military budget. I'm even gladder that he sends his defense secretary to NATO and says, hey, this war's got to end. But, this kind of stuff, it's a clown show. It's a clown car.
Yeah, it is like a clown car. They do absolutely absurd things all the time. I just wonder, if you went to Costa Rica and looked at their maps, the Costa Rican government, what it would say about Gulf of Mexico and Gulf of America. That'd be interesting too.
Hey, we've got a caller, and you might have heard him say, hello, Hal. So let me go to you, caller, right now. I'm going to unmute you. Sorry to interrupt you, Arlen, but we always give callers pride of place. Who's on?
It's Ari. How are you?
Hey, Ari, good to hear from you again. You called once before, and it was a great call. So what's on your mind?
Well, I'm going to the etymology, roots of America. It's from Americo Vespucci. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, it was an Italian explorer, I believe.
Right. So what are we going to do? I mean, he's Italian. Doesn't Donald maybe prefer somebody with his heritage, maybe an Irishman or a German? I don't know what exactly Trump's heritage was. But
well, he's German. His father, Fred, I think, was either an immigrant from Germany, I believe, came to the U.S. as a child. Maybe he was American. I'm not sure.
We need to change it from something Italian to something else.
I hope they don't name it.
He likes pizza.
Germany.
No. All right.
All right, Ari, thanks for the call. Appreciate that very, very much. Always nice to hear from Ari. I think that's what he had to say. Look, again, it's in a way, it's a side issue, but it does reflect poorly, I think, on our leadership that this is what they focus on.
Yeah, and that's very similar to a lot of other things they're doing. They're very cheap and minor league about so many things, and just disregarding the rules and conventions and Constitution for that matter, and that shouldn't be allowed.
All right, Arlen, I think consistent though with that worldview, which is basically we'll call it whatever the hell we like, and you're just going to have to put up with it, is this piece you shared about sovereigntism, which is the Trump, apparently, according to this Professor Middlestat at Rutgers University, that's his kind of foreign policy, sovereigntism. So I put this up for you, and I see you're, again, consulting your notes. So any thoughts on how the idea that we'll call it what we want to call it, it's the body of water, borders the United States. Of course, it also borders Mexico and it borders Cuba, but we're going to call it Gulf of Mexico. And kind of goes along with this sovereigntism worldview.
Well, Trump has been hard to pinhole. He's not exactly an isolationist. He's not exactly, all these different. Anyway, it's probably the best term, I think, to recognize the kind of ideas that he has. Sovereignty is, pretty much, pro-American, pro-white and nationalist, and, being against international bodies like the United Nations and the League of Nations as it used to be. So he said, here's a quote: international organizations and their agreements that erode our Constitution, rule of law, or popular sovereignty should not be reformed, Project 2025 explains. They should be abandoned. So, there's a lot of ideology here, too.
Oh, yeah, no question about it. But by the way, Shade points out, he says, you call this the Gulf of meaningless distraction. And in a way, it kind of is, but I think it's still worth discussing because, who's doing the distracting? Are we doing the distracting by talking about it, or is Trump doing the distraction by bringing it up in the first place?
Well, he's getting away with whatever he wants right now, and whether where it's going to end up, if it's going to end up in the courts, and if the courts will do anything about it, if they can, that's where we're going to have a constitutional crisis when the Supreme Court says you can't do that, and Trump says yes, I can. That's the scary part.
Well, here's my answer to that. In a way, it is a distraction. I think issues like the military budget, or whether we lock people up, we just sweep them up in a raid and don't tell their families and disappear them, I think, of course, are far more important. Major, cutting important programs that help poor people, that's really important. I think there's a great discussion to be had about U.S. aid and whether U.S. aid really has done good or harm, or some of both, and how to respond to that. I think those are all much more important in terms of the bigger picture. But this reflects, in my view, a kind of a ugly American centrism and arrogance that our foreign policy doesn't need. And while I'm not, and I think that the way you respond to it is by voting for a third party, by supporting the Green Party, because clearly Trump is not a good choice, and clearly Kamala in some ways was worse. So therefore, let's go to let's unite and build an alternative party.
And what's really disgraceful is the way the Republicans have fallen in line. They're really afraid of Trump. They're afraid they're going to be primaried, and so they just go along with everything he says and nominate the worst people in the world, the Robert F. Kennedys, and they'll probably nominate Kash Patel and all these other horrible people in his government. The Republicans have basically given up their right to do anything. They're not even defending their constitutional rights to use the budget. So they are worse, I think, than even Trump and his people.
All right, Arlen there, he is brooking no quarter. Arlen giving no quarter. And I'm not going to argue with you, Arlen, not because I agree necessarily, but we don't have that much time. And I want to get to another story. But yeah, you make a good, you draw the line or the connection between Project 2025 and this idea of renaming places that are based on, the geographic place names. And I think it's right. Again, it's this idea that America gets to do what it wants to do. All that said, when push comes to shove, in terms of foreign policy, Trump has done some good things. And, there's some scary stuff out there too. And I'm very worried about what will happen. I haven't talked a lot about Palestine, Israel, because there's been the ceasefire and it seems to be holding. And Trump has held it together because Netanyahu would love to start bombing Palestinians again. But I'm very worried that's going to happen soon.
Yeah, it very well might. I think the bottom line for me, I think there's a coup going on now. I think there's a authoritarian coup to put Trump to be the dictator of this country and do whatever he wants to do. And especially, Elon Musk, what's the story in him? He wants to go to the Treasury now and get all our records, and he does whatever he wants to do, even though he's unelected and from a foreign country, and he's got to be reined in.
Well, certainly lawsuits can be brought. I'm not clear what specifically you're referring to. I know we talked about this maybe a week or two ago, that at least what the Trump administration has been saying, the Treasury Department has been saying, the records are not actually an open book, right? I mean, you can see Musk gets access to some information, but not to names, not to addresses, not to individual social security numbers. I don't know how true that is or isn't true. So we still have to get more information out. It does seem to be, it's problematic at best. A coup seems a little strong. Even the New York Times didn't call it a coup. They said they're worried about it. And of course, the New York Times has been particularly anti-Trump from day one. So they're even not quite ready to call it a coup. I haven't heard any talk that Trump should be dictator or Trump deserves a third term. For now, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. We see the wars end, we see peace, and we see, the Democrats stop the worst cuts to important social programs.
I think it's a coup because he just gets to do whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. And there's no real opposition to him. And so he gets away with all kinds of things. They try to, other people try to get the courts involved to slow him down. But, the bottom line is they're going to do whatever they want to do because they feel they are, like Trump.
Arlen, we've seen the power of the president increase and increase and increase, even in the past few administrations, whether it's the way W pushed us into a war based on lies, whether it was the tortured Abu Ghraib, whether it was Obama greatly increasing the surveillance state. This isn't like Trump is somehow out of line or not following that same playbook. I'm not really clear that what he's doing. Again, I have huge problems with the immigrant treatment. But otherwise, this seems pretty much in line with what we've seen recent presidents do.
I don't think so. I think he's getting away he's doing everything that he wants to do no matter what. And it's, basically everything. So I think he just wants to have total control over the country. And that's what I see. A lot of other people have seen it too. Nobody's. All right,
Arlen, I wanted to get your take on something else. This is maybe a more personal matter. This came from my university, Wesleyan University, and we got this newsletter, and they're kind of responding to some of the directives that have come down from the Trump White House that affect higher institutions of higher education. So I highlighted some of this. I just really wanted your take because I'm not even sure how I feel about this. So I really wanted to get your thoughts. So this is what France Williams, I guess he's the minister of propaganda. No, they don't call it that, but he's the communications guru at Wesleyan, and he works closely with the president, Roth. So this there were some things in there that I really didn't like they recognize how anti-Semitism is surging. And you and I have debated this. I don't recognize that it's surging. I haven't seen any data that supports that claim. I don't believe that, but I didn't feel like arguing about that. I wanted your thoughts on this specific, what I just highlighted there. At Wesleyan, we are no longer allowed to be proactive in trying to increase the diversity of the faculty. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I think the Democrats have made a big mistake in emphasizing this the last few years. And I think that's another reason that cost them the election. They put too much on identity politics, and, people aren't really into that. And I think it's hurt Democrats a lot. Now, as far as, telling universities what to do and all that, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but I think it kind of fits in line with, their point, the Trump administration point of view. And, that I guess they feel they can do that.
I mean, I have very mixed reactions, somewhat similar to you. On the one hand, this is a private university. This is not like the University of Maryland, where I think, they have to first and foremost follow the laws of the state of Maryland and then the United States. But this is a private university. If they want to have a specific outreach or really push to have more professors of color. I'm not sure why that's the government's. I could argue it's not necessarily the government's responsibility to police, but I could make the other point, which is, well, wait a second. We do have anti-discrimination laws. If the university said we're just going to hire white professors, that would be illegal, and it should be. So I get the counter argument, which is you don't look at race. You don't look at religion. That shouldn't be part of the dialogue. So I understand that, but I also see the value of diversity on a campus. And I understand the point that, in the past, white applicants have had an advantage for whatever reason for jobs. So I just don't know how to think about this, Arlen, and I really wanted now I get you're saying politically it's not a good look for Democrats to lean too heavily on identity politics. I agree with you 100%. I think they should be talking about universal politics and universal programs that help people based on need, based on their membership in the human race, not in any particular subspecies or subrace of that group. But all that said, I'm kind of mixed. I mean, I get it. You want your faculty to be diverse. You want your student body to be diverse. But at the same time, I mean, don't you want your faculty to be the people who got all straight A's at the top schools and came up with brilliant new theories to explain, whatever particular dilemma or challenge they're exploring? So I don't know, but I really wanted your take.
Yeah, well, I think, it's a problem, and maybe the Democrats went too far in, wanting the DEI for everything, and maybe that's overdoing it, and I think it probably is. I mean, you want to give people at least equal rights. That's the most important thing. But you're bringing up a larger topic, and that's education. I'm really worried about education. Some of the states are kind of changing their rules and everything. And Trump has talked about getting rid of the education department. And what they did, the things they did in Florida, they take the books off the shelves that they don't like and, have to teach this or don't teach that. I mean, there's a lot of these, Trump allies that are trying to change the course of education and making it, fit their political point of view.
I think this is all, a backlash, certainly against the Democratic focus on identity and their unwillingness, their refusal to take on directly income and wealth inequality, which is the real driver of so many of the pathologies we face in America. And the Democratic Party, Arlen, let's face it, since the election of Trump has not changed, right? We're not seeing this outcry against pro-billionaire policies by the Republicans. We're not really seeing or hearing much of anything from the Democrats.
Well, the Democrats, Trump's only been in there less than a month, and the Democrats aren't quite sure what to do. They were obviously very hurt and very discouraged by what happened in the election, and they do have to change. And so we'll just have to watch and see, what kind of leadership comes out of the Democratic Party. I wish it was Bernie Sanders, but he's too old. But there's got to be better ways for the Democrats to run their party rather than being pro-corporatist and pro whoever gives them the most donations. That's got to be stopped.
Well, then but this is my point is I don't see it being stopped.
Not yet. No, you're right. And it'll be really hard to do because right now, the billionaires and the wealthy corporations and all that, they have the upper hand right now, and they're not going to give up their spot very easily. So it may be a long-term process. I don't know, but the Democrats have to change, obviously.
All right, well, we're just at the hour. Lots of times I'll go a little over the hour. I've gone through the deck, but I didn't want it to be all about slides either. Do you have anything else you want to focus on? I know you talked about the coup. You've spotlighted that at thebigpicturereport.com. By the way, I don't have Arlen's title. I was like wondering, where is Arlen's? You know what? I should have your guest name up, and I don't, and I'm very, very sorry. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. Arlen, I apologize. People should know it is the thought leader. Let's see. There we go.
Those credentials, I can show you them on the screen if I.
There you go. Thebigpicturereport.com. There it is. And you had a little bit of issue with the, you were saying, can we have a Halitics where we don't have any tech issues? And I have to say, this has been a pretty good one, to be perfectly honest. It's been pretty clean. Without a lot of problems. But one issue we do have is we didn't have your name underneath your, chin there the whole time. So for that, I take full and complete ownership.
It takes a little
don't forget thebigpicturereport.com. Are you?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, your focus is going to continue to be on how bad Trump is, right? I mean, do you see anything else that matters to that degree at this point?
Not right now, because he's pretty much taken over the country, and everything is about Trump and what they're doing. So I can't imagine what else could be more important right now.
Do you worry, though, Arlen, that by centering Trump to the degree you do, you're actually kind of maybe helping him? They say don't think of an elephant, and of course you're going to think of an elephant. So if you're saying Trump's bad, Trump, people might start thinking Trump's all there is. There's no alternative even.
Well, Trump is doing everything right now. I mean, he's controlling everything. So, you can't ignore him. Somehow he seems to suck the energy out of everybody else. And he seems to be, and he's where he wants to be. People are looking at him and admiring him and, fawning over him and kissing his rings and other things, So he's happy. But I'm not.
Isn't that why the Democrats need to present a compelling, attractive alternative so that it isn't just about Trump?
Yeah, and I wish they'd get better leadership, too. I don't think Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are that great. I think we can do better than that. So, there has to be a new narrative and a real strong reaction and competition for Trump. Right now, he's got it all. He
doesn't that poor leadership that you're referring to redound to the rank and file Democrat? I mean, they all voted for these people. It wasn't like there's like 40% of the Democrats said, no, Hakeem Jeffries is awful. We're not going to support him to be our leader. They all supported Hakeem Jeffries, every last one of them. And it would be, and I understand the arguments, well, you need a majority, you need almost unanimity. You do for speaker, but you don't for majority, or for, in this case, minority leader, you don't need unanimity. But even if you want that, if you want some consensus, shouldn't they have at least put up a fight? I mean, Jeffries is a corporate centric. I mean, there's no question about it. He has made it clear from day one. He is a party guy. He is a corporate guy. He's a Wall Street guy. He's a Zionist. Doesn't it make even the farthest left Democrat in the House look kind of bad that they went along with this guy as their leader?
Well, maybe at the time it seemed a reasonable thing to do because he's very intelligent and he knows how to work the system. But right now, you need somebody really strong that's going to, counteract Trump. And he's not one to do it. And I think Schumer's too old to do it. But the bottom line is the Democrats have to start becoming the party of the working class like they used to be. They have to be, pro-union and, pro-worker. And they've kind of drifted away from that, and they need to move in that direction.
Well, we agree. I guess where we disagree is whether that's even possible. I don't see any movement by the Democrats, I think, would be performative rather than bespeaking a true shift in the priorities of the party's leadership.
It's going to take time, Hal. Like I say, Trump's only been in there a month, and of course he's done not even a month, but he's done all kinds of, really bad things that are going to hurt this country. So it's going to take time, and I hope we have that opportunity. I hope the Democrats are able to make some changes, and we have a second party that's, a strong opposition.
All right. Well, Arlen, it's been, as always, a pleasure. I guess I'll see you a week from tomorrow. Is that right? We're all going to get to see you Tuesday. And are we keeping the 2 p.m. Eastern time, or are you moving now to?
No. Yeah, we'll keep things the same. It's fine. The time that we're doing now works for me because I'm going to be in California for the next few months.
Okay, because I wasn't clear about that. I can't. I thought you were thinking of maybe going to noon, but you're saying no, you don't need to do that.
I don't need to do that. No, especially now that we moved to Tuesday. It would have been a problem. Monday maybe, but Tuesday, 11 o'clock is fine Pacific time.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for Erlen and me. Great to have you, Erlen. I'll see you 1 week from tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific. Thanks, folks, for checking in. We really appreciate you as well. Great to hear from Ari. Comments from Shade were more than welcome in the chat. We'll be back tomorrow.